All right, I want to take you inside of an experience that most executives have never had before, and it involves the White House. I'll never forget that day that I'm standing outside of my office building, waiting for the black SUV to pull up to pick up me and my boss, Secretary Kathleen Sebelius, who at the time, I was a senior advisor, director of external affairs over the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, and Secretary Sebelius was the cabinet secretary. And we were waiting on the SUV to pick us up to take us to a meeting in the White House. This meeting in the White House was an incredibly important and high stakes meetings with a bunch of external stakeholders. Now, what do I mean external stakeholders? We were trying to implement the Affordable Care Act to provide coverage for millions of Americans. But at the time, there were a lot of people opposed to the Affordable Care Act. There were people who would benefit from the ACA, but were starkly against it. And we had invited all of these people to a meeting in the White House. So every healthcare executive that you can think about in the United States of America that's a senior level executive was invited to this meeting. I'm really talking about the CEOs. And all of them were not in the same place on the ACA. Some were pro the Affordable Care Act. Some were neutral to the Affordable Care Act. Others were against the Affordable Care Act. But all of them had been invited, and 16 of them had confirmed to come to this meeting in the White House. And so I was heading over to the White House with my boss, Secretary Kathleen Sebelius, to brief them on where we are on the ACA and to get them all on board. So here's the main point. When the SUV pulled up and we got into the vehicle, I knew we had about 10 minutes in the car before we went over. And my job as a senior executive service level leader in the agency was to make sure that my boss was prepared for this meeting. So my job was to collect the data. My job was to make sure that it was clear. My job was to help her to understand who's who, what's what, and where does everybody stand as it relates to the ACA. So when we have the conversations, she had all of the background information, all of the right information in order to be able to make a decision or to tell them what we needed them to do on the ACA. My job was to be prepared and to help her to be prepared. And while we were in the car driving over to the White House, I opened up the briefing book and began to explain to Secretary Sebelius what we needed to do. And she closed the book and looked at me and says, I don't need your information. I don't need any information. I know what I need to say to these guys. And that is when the moment hit me where, as Jay-Z would call it, a moment of clarity, or maybe Samuel L. Jackson would call it a moment of clarity in the book from Pulp Fiction. Secretary Sebelius is a leader that was prepared for the moment. There was a lot of uncertainty in the air, unsurety around where this was going to go, whether the ACA was going to succeed or fail. And here we were in a high stakes meeting with a group of people who could make or break everything that we need. And my leader says to me, I don't need any more information. That was my moment of clarity. And here's what I learned about that moment is that so many people out there, particularly leaders like you, always want to have all of your ducks in a row, have all of the information, all of the details before you make a decision. And you're waiting on all of those details, all of that information doesn't help you with your analysis. It just creates more paralysis. That's a problem. Is that in the era of uncertainty, what people are looking for are confidence and direction from their leaders. They're not looking for uncertainty, but you give off uncertainty. You give off unpreparedness when you live in a state of paralysis because of your analysis. So let me tell you what the biggest challenge is for most executives in 2026. That story was from some years ago, but it translates to what's going on with leaders today. Is that we got so many leaders out here who are waiting for certainty that never is actually going to come. As I shared with you in a previous live, we're in a constant state of uncertainty right now. So the only thing that's going to be consistent, the only thing that's going to be constant is the uncertainty. And the more you try to wait and prepare and to get ready and wait for certainty to come, the more fleeting it's going to be. And that's the problem is that you think that you have to have all of the information, and it actually never comes. And when I tell you that this is hurting you, I'm telling you like this: waiting for certainty about an experience, about an environment, about the challenges that come. The longer you wait for certainty, the more authority you lose. Because you need to have confidence in the authority to deal with whatever the uncertainty is. But it's hard to deal with the uncertainty when you're just waiting for it to go away. You cannot bury your head in the sand and think that the uncertainty is going to go away, because it's not going away anytime soon, in the near future or the far future. So the more that you wait for certainty, the less of a leader you're going to look like, the less authority people are going to believe that you have to do anything about it, because you're waiting for everything to be right before you make the first step. So that's a big mistake, is waiting for certainty when you know that it's never going to come. You're undermining your authority. Now, the second thing is that I want you to understand is that a lot of leaders want to make data-driven decisions. I totally support data-driven decisions. You should make most of your decisions with information that you have gathered about the environment that you're in. But here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to confuse data with clarity. I don't want you to confuse analysis with action. I don't want you to be stuck on information when you need to be using intuition. So what am I framing up for you? So many leaders think that I have to get all of the data. I got to have all of the information. I got to know all of the stuff that's going on. Give me all of the reports. Give me this report and give me that report. Give me the bio on this. Give me the background on this. Give me the context around this. I totally believe context is important. But I will tell you what's more important than anything else is being clear about where you're trying to get to. See, the problem with some leaders is that they confuse data with certainty and with clarity. And data doesn't provide certainty and clarity. Data provides information, but clarity drives decisions. And so if you need to make a decision, you need to be crystal clear about where you're trying to go and what you want to do. You got to have that clarity, because that's going to drive your decision. But the data will inform the decision that you make. But so many leaders confuse this. They get stuck on, well, I need all of the information. You know, it's like the guy who says, you know what, I ain't ready to get married yet. You know, if you say that you ain't ready to get married, you ain't never going to be ready. You ain't never going to have enough money. You're never going to be mature enough. You're not going to have a good enough job or all of the things you want. Sometimes you got to be clear that I want to be married, because that clarity will drive your decision. The data will inform you, might make you change up some things. But the challenge is so many people think that they got to have every ounce of information about everything before they make a decision. because they're not clear about what the outcome they want on the other side. So I'm telling you right now, do not confuse data with clarity. Data gives you information, but your clarity will drive your decision. Don't make that mistake. The third mistake that leaders make, or this is what I would call a problem that leaders have in difficult situations, people don't take action. They default to playing it safe. And I bet you've been in this circumstance. You see things going on. You see things going wrong. You see things challenged. And the last thing you want to do is to be the leader who sticks their head out first. You want to wait for somebody else to say something before you say something. Before you challenge back, you want to see who else challenge back. You never want to lead. You want to wait. You want to play it safe. You want to not pick a side. You don't want to be for this decision, or you don't want to be against this decision. You think that being neutral is where you need to be. You want to be in the middle of the road. Well, I learned the challenge with being in the middle of the road years ago. And I had someone tell me, Anton, the only thing in the middle of the road are yellow lines and dead animals. You can't be middle of the road. You can't be lukewarm. You either need to be hot or you need to be cold. And the mistake that so many leaders make is that they try to play it safe and remain neutral in uncertain circumstances. They want to remain neutral in the environment when it's disruptive. But you can't remain neutral, because that would be the biggest mistake that you make, is thinking that you can play it safe. Because neutrality is not leadership. It's passive. It's followership. You're waiting for somebody else to take action before you do something. And we don't need executives like that. We don't need leaders like that. We don't need people who are even just waiting to see what their industry peers are going to do. Somebody has to be first, and it should be you. But you ain't going to be first as long as you have a mindset that neutrality is where you need to be. That's not leadership. And that story I showed at the beginning is that Secretary Sebelius wasn't waiting for certainty before she even went to the meeting. She surely wasn't waiting for data or more data and information before she was clear about what she needed to say to them. And the third thing, she was not at all trying to play it safe. She came into the room ready to rumble and ready to battle with people who should be invested in helping us, but because of the political winds being up and down and all these other things, they weren't certain where they wanted to be. And she drove to that meeting ready, prepared. And when I say drove, the Uber driver drove us, or the agency driver drove us. We just rode in the SUV. We got to the meeting. We got out of the car, and she walked in directed and committed to what she needed to say. So if you want to be a leader who navigates uncertainty and manages crisis at the highest level, the way we manage crisis in the middle of the White House on the president's number one domestic policy issue, one that could have been make or break, because we were in a make or break moment at the time. And now hindsight, we know we made it, but it was a make or break moment. We didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring, particularly if these executives did get on board and support the Affordable Care Act. So let me tell you what Secretary Sebelius exemplified and what I hope you exemplify as a leader. The first thing is that you need to anchor in the purpose of the mission and in your convictions. See, one of the things that Secretary Sebelius was clear about, that when she held her hand up and took that oath of office to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services, to do her best to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the American people through her agency, it didn't matter who was on board or who was not on board. Her purpose was to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the American people. And she knew by helping people to get health insurance coverage that less people were going to die. People could get sick and would recover better because they had insurance coverage. And more people would be able to bring healthy babies into this world because they were covered. I knew she was particularly interested in that because she had a new grandbaby who's probably, 15 now, if I think about it the right way. So my context for you is to understand that you have to anchor in your purpose. That's where you got to be as a leader, anchored in purpose. The second thing you got to do is you got to decide your direction long before you think about perfection. See, it would have been perfect for me to brief Secretary Sebelius on all 16 people to know their background, research the footnotes, to be super crystal clear about where they stood on things. She didn't need all of that. She didn't want perfection. What she wanted was direction, and what she needed was action. And so she went in ready to take action. So for you and your team, here's what I want you to understand. Your team is waiting for you to take action. They don't need you to be perfect. They don't need you to have all of the answers. They don't need you to have all of the details. They just need you to be ready. As Nas and Premier said on the new album, get ready. They need you to be ready. And they don't need you to be perfect. And the third thing, I want you to understand that when it comes to uncertainty, the thing that Secretary Sebelius had above all else is that she built the muscle to respond to crisis before she needed the muscles to use the muscles. See, being a former governor, she had been through her fair share of leadership experiences and challenges. So she had already worked on how to respond to a crisis before there ever was a crisis. She didn't know it was coming, but she was ready. So what am I telling you to do? As a leader, you need to stay ready. You need to stay ready. You need to build the muscle of action-based response long before there's ever a circumstance of crisis. Because if you sit around and say, I need more time, I need more money, I need more information, I need more data, I need more certainty. If you're waiting for those things, then you're going to be paralyzed and not take action. You're not going to be responsive to the environment. And the best leaders that overcome uncertainty, adversity, and all of those things are leaders who build the muscle of adaptability long before they need it. So get comfortable being uncomfortable. Get comfortable making decisions in uncomfortableness. Get comfortable being committed in the purpose of the work that you do, regardless of whatever the circumstances are around that work. You got to be ready. And I just put this together because I want you to understand that this crisis in the White House, the stuff that I saw from Secretary Sebelius during those days, demonstrated to me what every executive needs to be doing in their organization is you got to stop waiting for certainty and you got to take action, because certainty is never going to come in this environment. The second thing you got to do is you cannot confuse data for decision-making, data for clarity. You got to be ready to make a decision, committed to an outcome, and just find the pathway, the best pathway to get there. And the third thing that you cannot do is to play it safe, be middle of the road, to think that somebody else is going to make the decision. You got to take bold, mission-driven action. Be prepared to act before you need to act. That's what the best leaders do. So I hope this resonated with you. I hope you got some value out of it. I hope you share it with your leader, the leaders that you work with, so you all can be ready to navigate the uncertainty that we're in by being the most adaptable people that you can be for the teams that you lead. I want to thank you for watching. Have a fantastic day.